West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Well, how many White House chiefs of staff have to go to prison to convince future White House chiefs of staff that they are not above the law? You would think that the answer is one. And that happens to be exactly the number of White House chiefs of staff who have gone to prison for committing crimes in the White House. And no White House chief of staff since then has ever been the focus of a criminal investigation again. Until now. Until Donald Trump's last White House chief of staff, Mark Meadows, who has already done more damage to Donald Trump than anyone who worked for him in the White House by handing over his text messages and other electronic communications to the January 6th committee. That is how we found out that Donald Trump's oldest son, the one named after him, was texting Mark Meadows on January 6th to tell him just how bad the attack on the Capitol looked for his father. That's what Donald Trump Jr. was worried about. Donald Trump Jr.'s relationship with his father was apparently not good enough for him to actually tell his father that directly. Mark Meadows turning over his text to the January 6th committee also revealed to us that Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas's wife was texting Mark Meadows with utterly insane criminal urgings about refusing to peacefully transfer the presidency to the duly elected President Joe Biden. Mark Meadows' texts were how we found out that all of the Fox propaganda players, the primetime players especially, were texting Mark Meadows on January 6th, trying to get him to get the President of the United States to tell his followers to stop committing crimes at the Capitol on January 6th. And of course, the President refused to do that. Recent reports have indicated that Donald Trump's attorneys have been very, very worried about Mark Meadows. They weren't sure if Mark Meadows might be in some way cooperating with Special Prosecutor Jack Smith's investigation of Donald Trump's possession of government documents, as well as Jack Smith's investigation of Donald Trump's attempts to overturn the presidential election leading up to and on January 6th. And today, we learned Mark Meadows has testified to Jack Smith's grand jury. This is the single most important information that we have learned today about Jack Smith's criminal investigation of Donald Trump and Mark Meadows. Mark Meadows, criminal defense lawyer, who is the most widely respected criminal defense lawyer representing anyone in the Trump investigation, told the New York Times, quote, "Without commenting on whether or not Mr. Meadows has testified before the grand jury or in any other proceeding, Mr. Meadows has maintained a commitment to tell the truth where he has a legal obligation to do so. In other words, the New York Times reporting is correct. Mark Meadows has testified to the grand jury. That's as close as Mark Meadows, highly experienced Washington criminal defense lawyer, could come to publicly revealing that his client has indeed testified to the grand jury. ABC News is reporting tonight, sources tell ABC News that Meadows answered questions on both Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election and Trump's alleged mishandling of classified documents. In the grand jury, if Mark Meadows made the mistake of not telling the truth, then he will probably become the second White House chief of staff in history to be convicted of crimes. And they might actually be the identical criminal charges that sent Bob Haldeman to prison in 1975. Bob Haldeman was one of 48 people who were convicted of crimes or pleaded guilty in the investigation of criminal conspiracies involving Republican President Richard Nixon that came to be known as the Watergate investigation. Bob Haldeman was President Nixon's White House chief of staff. He behaved in conspiracy with the president as if he and the president were above the law. They both found out the hard way that they weren't. As the criminal investigation closed in on Richard Nixon and assured that he would be impeached by the House of Representatives, and Republican senators told the Republican president that he would also be convicted and removed from office by the Senate, that's what made Richard Nixon resign the presidency in 1974. And a month later, President Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon for all the crimes Richard Nixon committed during his presidency. And Richard Nixon then lived the rest of his life a free and disgraced man. It wasn't so easy for Bob Haldeman, who a year after President Nixon was forced to resign, was convicted in 1975 of conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and perjury. 3 counts of perjury. Tonight, Mark Meadows may be on his way to being charged with those exact crimes. Or Mark Meadows might be a cooperating witness against Donald Trump, the kind of witness who could become the star witness in both of Jack Smith's investigations of Donald Trump. Mark Meadows was a 16-year-old boy in Brandon, Florida, attending Brandon High School the day Bob Haldeman went to prison. There were sharp, politically minded 16-year-olds in those days who were very aware of every aspect of Bob Haldeman's crimes. But maybe Mark Meadows wasn't one of those kids. Maybe Mark Meadows at 16 was completely oblivious, as maybe most 16-year-olds might have been, to what happened to Bob Haldeman. Mark Meadows appears to have remained completely oblivious to the life lesson for everyone in Washington that Bob Haldeman's story represents. Bob Haldeman told his sentencing judge, "I'm sorry for what I've done, for what I've been responsible for what's been the result and the damage to many, many people, and I think our whole governmental system." Mark Meadows should have issued that statement word for word on the night of January 6th. He was responsible for allowing Donald Trump to get to the point where Donald Trump was the rhetorical leader of an attack, a violent attack on the Capitol. Mark Meadows could have tried to stop all of that, and he didn't try to stop any of that. When you're the White House chief of staff and you do nothing to stop a criminal president from doing damage to our whole governmental system, as Bob Haldeman put it, then you are responsible. Mark Meadows is responsible. In a letter to his sentencing judge, Bob Haldeman wrote, "I recognize the terrible cost to the nation that this whole Watergate case has represented, and I will carry for the rest of my life the burden of knowing that I played a major role in that tragedy. The rest of Bob Haldeman's life was not as long as it should have been. He died at age 67. We can only hope that Mark Meadows will carry for the rest of his life the burden of knowing that he played a major role in the national tragedy of January 6th and possibly played a major role in committing crimes of obstruction of justice with and for Donald Trump. Republican memories are too short. During the Trump years, Republicans forgot about the Nixon years. Donald Trump foolishly thought that he was smarter than Richard Nixon. And Mark Meadows forgot or never even knew about the Bob Haldeman years as White House Chief of Staff and the Bob Haldeman years in federal prison.
It is Wednesday, the 8th of June of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? No one will. No, they won't. Well, something's, under my craw. Actually, a couple of things. And yeah, the Bonesaw Golf League merging with the PGA is really making me quite livid. You know? Live-id. That sounds like a Freudian slip, maybe. But regardless, as much as that really irks me, something that irks me even more is that, well, actually, good. They arrested the white woman who killed the black mom and charged her with a crime. Manslaughter. The cops all along have been trying to make out both parties as being the same. They were both so antagonistic to each other. Well, you had one woman waving a gun around the neighborhood, threatening the little kids in the neighborhood with a gun for years, throwing stuff, hurling racist abuse, essentially terrorizing that neighborhood for years. And the neighborhood called the cops on this lady. And how did the cops approach it? Well, the black lady seems to have hulked up. You know how these angry black ladies are. Antagonize anybody, won't they? I think that's what went on there. Hypnotized by the angry black lady syndrome. Disregarding the fact that you had a... do we call her crazy? I'm calling her a racist bigot biatch who terrorized that neighborhood for years that the cops didn't do diddly. Made the mom, the black mom, beloved by the neighborhood, who took other kids. She took other kids to football practice when their moms had to work. She helped them with their homework. She fed them. And she had a full-time job herself plus her own kids. Everybody loved her. Nobody could stand the racist biatch waving a gun out. She didn't own the lot next door to her tiny little domicile apartment. The kids were playing in a lot. If the kids played on the street, if the kids played in their own apartment building parking strip, she would get upset, throw things, go out there and terrorize the kids, call them the worst names, hurl racist abuse to their faces. And the mom, beloved by the neighborhood, said, "Lady, you got to stop doing that." And the cops say that her behavior is just the same as the white ladies. Stand your ground. They had to determine whether this lady could have claimed stand your ground because the angry black lady was going to pound down the door with her 9-year-old kid there. Manslaughter. Manslaughter, and that's it. Of course, try a little mental exercise and let's reverse the roles. The first time a black mom waved a gun around in a neighborhood, terrorizing the neighborhood, keep your kids in your goddamn houses, I can't stand them. How long do you think she'd last? How fast do you think the cops would come and throw her ass in jail? We know the answer to that. Manslaughter. Not second-degree murder. I wouldn't expect first-degree murder. I wouldn't say it was necessarily premeditated. But she let her feelings known for years in that neighborhood, what she was capable of. She'd flash a gun at a 9-year-old. This is what I got for you if you don't behave, you little brat. Get out of here. She can get away with it for years. Trayvon Martin visiting his dad, bag of Skittles, some Snapple. Apparently he's a bigger threat than the adult who killed his ass with a gun while the kid was on the ground. And the adult stood over him. Stand your ground. I know Zimmerman couldn't really defend himself on that, but boy, that was sure part of the trial, wasn't it? Now, they have to determine whether a woman who fired through a closed door killed a black mom with her 9-year-old kid standing next to her. Well, it could have been, she could have felt really threatened. Yeah, damn right she felt threatened. And who was complicit in that fear? The stoking of racial animosity. The scary black mom, angry. They're finally going to kill us in our sleep. But you can't call it racism because that might make some little kid feel bad somewhere who happens to be white. Okay. We know where this is going. We've seen this before. And I will say that we have a peculiar brand of that type of fascism in this country. Because we better remind ourselves, the fascists modeled a lot of their fascist understandings off of the United States of America and the dregs of our society. So in Glendale, you had the Proud Boys and the 3 Percenters and Moms for Liberty rioting because some school was going to honor Pride Day or Pride Month. Brown shirt stormtrooper mofos did this exact same thing in Nazi Germany. What was the first thing that the Nazis did when they decided to Nazify their country? They did away with a hospital that attended to gender-affirming care. I suppose that's how you would put it. Not only shut it down, but killed the patients. And I know that we cannot compare the Nazis who exterminated 6 million Jews plus. What I am doing is I'm comparing our Nazis with the Nazis from the 20s and the 30s who built up their juggernaut and blitzkrieged representative democracy such as it was. and then started exterminating 6 million plus people in the world. Well, immediate vicinity. Okay. Oh, Bonesaw Golf. Jesus, my God. And now we got representatives on CNN. Chris Licht, goodbye. But the residual of that stink is there. You got some representative saying, hey, we got to let 9/11 just go. What the fuck are you talking about? Excuse my French in the morning. We're just going to allow the fact that a country that financed those terrorists who flew those planes into our buildings and into our Pentagon, and fortunately our people took down the other plane and crashed it in a big field, I believe in Pennsylvania, right? You know, Flight 93. We're going to just let that go. That's just ancient history. How dare you? How dare you? Get over it. Hell no. We never attended to the facts in the first place. And guess who is benefiting from all of this? 9/11 truthers like Donald Trump. Wonder how much that has to do with it. Are the Saudis financing another run of Donald Trump for the president? Are they going to back him to the hilt? I thought that was against the law. We can't apply the law to a guy running for office, taking illegal money from a hostile foreign power, purporting to be our friends. Hell no, it's a cookbook. This whole sports washing bullshit is a cookbook, and we know it. So, if you ever had any question about how greedy the elite might be, who have no national allegiances, they'll just go where the money is. Well, now we know. I can't necessarily say that all of the players in the PGA should be colored with the same brush of being absolutely greedy, because the majority of them are absolutely pissed that a decision was made without their input, because the leadership knew what their input would be. But the Sauds made an offer to the leadership of the PGA that they could not refuse. And I think it's a little bit more than a horse head at the end of your bed when you wake up in the morning. Well, that might be part of it. There's a bone saw involved in that, too. And then I hear that this is supposed to be good for the fans. Bullshit. The Russians invaded Ukraine, and we're supposed to give in to the Russians for the benefit of the rest of, our viewership? The Sauds conducted a hostile takeover. And this is not just for business. This is geopolitical, and we know it. I don't really want them telling us how we're going to live our lives and be the morality police. Libs of TikTok? You think they're bad? Geez, wait until we get the Curb Saw group. Yep. Going to have to teach these little ladies a lesson. You were driving? Gotta chop their heads off. Literally. Is that where we're going? No, damn well not. No. Okay, I've ranted and ranted and ranted. Indeed, I have. So I should go ahead and fill you in on what we have in store for you, because we do take time to put a show together. Curate this salon. That's what we do. Okay, so Lawrence at the top, yes, he did specify that Mark Meadows could be only the second White House Chief of Staff to be convicted of crimes. Or he might turn out to be a John Dean. Either or. On the rest of the menu, Virginia regulators are expected to take a final vote on whether to advance Youngkin's plan to withdraw from a multi-state carbon cap and trade program. Because, with all that smoke over there on the East Coast, don't worry about it. Messages and a dead raccoon were left for an Oregon mayor and a black city council member. I wonder what that message was about. And the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers revoked a permit for a Minnesota mine citing threats to a downstream tribe's water standards. The Army Corps of Engineers did that. Wow. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where an Air India Boeing 777 flying to San Francisco made an emergency landing in Russia's Siberia after experiencing engine problems, and they're hoping that they can leave by Thursday if the Russians let them. And artist Francois Guillot, the acclaimed painter who loved and later left Picasso, is dead at age 101. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across to the left from that chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance, if you could send those funds to us once a month, it helps us pay our bills and all the other sundry costs associated with running this powerhouse of resistance. And we thank you for your generosity, and to those of you who have upped your monthly patronage, thank you very much. It comes at a very needed time. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime, and the show notes and links are where the actual articles that we are deriving our mirth from can be found in their entirety, indeed. So you can find those by following my social media feeds, and then you'll know, because we all want to know. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, such as it is, you can do so at Cookbook West. And most importantly, would you please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Please do pick them up. Sarah Rankin of the Associated Press brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Virginia regulators are expected to take a final vote today, Wednesday, on whether to advance Youngkin's plan to withdraw from a multi-state carbon cap and trade program. Virginia spent years under Democratic administrations moving toward participation in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which environmental advocates say is a proven tool to help reduce pollution and address climate change. But that has been thrown into reverse since Youngkin, a Republican who says the program has functioned as a regressive tax on electricity users, took office in January of 2022. final decision to repeal by the State Air Pollution Control Board, which is controlled by Youngkin appointees, and backed withdrawal in a previous vote by 4-1 with 2 abstentions, would clear one of the last remaining hurdles to the governor's proposal, though it is ultimately expected to face a legal challenge. The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI, is an effort by 12 mid-Atlantic and Northeast states to reduce power plants' carbon emissions. Participating states require plants of certain generating capacity to purchase allowances to emit carbon dioxide. In Virginia, most proceeds from the sale of allowances, which have reached nearly $590 million so far, are divvied up between efforts to assist localities affected by recurrent flooding and sea level rise, and a state-administered account to support energy efficiency programs for low-income individuals. Youngkin, who acknowledges the threat of climate change and has pledged to address sea level rise, says his concerns with RGGI, the RGGI is pronounced Reggie, center on the state's electricity utility policy and a 2020 law that made the state a full participant in the program. The law included language that said the costs of allowances purchased through the initiative would be deemed environmental compliance costs that may be recovered from ratepayers of monopoly utilities Dominion Energy Virginia and Appalachian Power. The imposition of the RG carbon tax fails to offer any incentive to change behavior. Current law allows power generators such as Dominion Energy to pass on all their costs, essentially bearing no costs for the carbon credits, a 2022 administration report said. Nate Beneforado, a senior attorney with the Southern Environmental Law Center, pushed back on that argument, noting that independent power producers that are regulated differently and account for 30% of Virginia's power sector emissions also must comply. In public comment on the proposal, the Southern Environmental Law Center said Virginia's emission levels were stagnant in the decade before the state joined RGGI, followed by a clear shift in reductions in the years since. At the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Someone left a dead raccoon and a sign with intimidating language that mentioned a black city councilor outside the law office of an Oregon mayor, police said. Redmond Mayor Ed Fitch found the raccoon in the sign on Monday, the Redmond Police Department said in a news release. The sign mentioned Fitch and Redmond City Councilor Clifford Evelyn by name. Fitch called the sign's language racially hateful. He declined to elaborate, but told the Bulletin, a local paper there, "I feel bad for Clifford. It seems there's some people in town that can't accept the fact that Clifford is black and is on the city council. Police are not revealing the sign's exact language in order to maintain the integrity of the investigation." Police said they are investigating the act as a potential hate crime. Evelyn, a retired law enforcement officer who was elected to the council in 2021, described the act as a hate crime, but he has confidence in the police investigation, Oregon Public Broadcasting reported. Now, of course, we know raccoon imagery has long been an insulting anti-black character in the United States. With roots in slavery, it's among the most blatantly degrading of all black stereotypes according to the Jim Crow Museum of Racist Imagery in Michigan. In recent years, a black Redmond teenager found a threatening message on her doorstep, while a failed Deschutes County Commission candidate displayed a Confederate flag at the city's 4th of July parade. The people in this part of the country are just going to have to catch up, Evelyn said. It's just the knuckleheads that can't get on track, and they're causing harm to everyone and making us look bad. Steve Karnowski of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers said yesterday, Tuesday, it has revoked a crucial federal permit for the proposed new range copper nickel mine in northeastern Minnesota, a project popularly known as Polymet, saying the permit did not comply with the water quality standards set by a sovereign downstream tribe. The Corps said in a statement it revoked the Clean Water Act permit, which it had previously suspended, because the permit does not ensure compliance with water quality requirements on the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. The tribe's reservation on the St. Louis River is downstream from the mine and processing plant near Babbitt and Hoyt Lakes. This is a huge victory, said Paula Maccabee, an attorney for Water Legacy, one of the environmental groups that have been fighting the proposed mine in court and in the regulatory process for several years. It's a victory for tribal sovereignty, it's a victory for science, and it's a victory for the law. Although Polymet had suffered other setbacks, this is by far the most consequential victory for human health, water quality, and tribal sovereignty. The Corps and New Range Copper Nickel is free to submit a new permit application with modifications to the project to make it comply with the tribe's water quality requirements, but Maccabee said the Corps' decision memo makes it clear that it would be difficult for the company to successfully address all the issues raised by the tribe and by the Environmental Protection Agency. Well, that brings us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, To Be Careful or Not. Nicole Holofcener wrote 2018's Can You Ever Forgive Me, starring Melissa McCarthy. Before that, she wrote and directed 2013's Enough Said, starring James Gandolfini and frequent collaborator Julie Louis-Dreyfus. And now she's directing one of her own screenplays again. It's fun slowly learning what You Hurt My Feelings is about. Holofcener takes a long time introducing you to this clutch of people in New York City who are apparently secure enough money-wise that they're free to spiral in on their own insecurities, the failings of their partners, and whether or not their creativity-based jobs work for them, since they clearly don't have to work for their jobs. And when the penny finally drops and you realize what issue the movie is going to turn on, Holofcener is well poised to steadily and confidently pay off all that she has set up. I've said before that it's hard for me to ignore my unsettledness when million-dollar actors and directors dress down to portray financially desperate people. Well, here's the opposite. People with money portraying people with money. But I just don't care about the life events and the concerns of these privileged, self-focused characters. Which begs the question. Rich people play poor people? Rich people play rich people? Can I ever be satisfied? I don't know. Maybe I'm more like these characters than I care to admit. Maybe Holofcener has struck something universal by telescoping into this very specific group, and that's that many of us are stuck seeing the world through our own little neurotic glasses. As we hear twice in the film, we know the world is falling apart, but we still blow so much energy caring about the things closer to us or that we just hold close to us. Anyway, You Hurt My Feelings is a deadpan, ironic comedy of neuroses that feels like updated mid-stage Woody Allen minus the creepy, inappropriate relationships and the guilt you feel from enabling the inappropriate relationships of a creep. Just, in case you care. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
I don't want to ruffle any feathers, but this is really the best way to describe terror birds.
The terror birds are fucking amazing. There's no discussion about it. They are the most amazing group of birds that existed ever.
I'm Flora Lichtman, and this is Scientific American's Science Quickly. And today is my swan song to big birds. Gargantuan game. Fucking huge feathered friends. This is the last episode in this 4-part series. And the bird on deck for today, it's been on my life list for a while. I'm squawking about one of the most frightening birds to ever peck out a place on planet Earth. The terror bird. Let me introduce you to our terror bird expert.
My name is Federico Javier de Grange. Everybody calls me Dino.
Dino's an avian paleontologist in Argentina, and he has a special relationship with terror birds.
Oh, I love them. I even have a tattoo of a terror bird, so yes, they mark me forever. I like to use the word bizarre, which is quite common here in my country. We say bizarro. Terror birds are bizarre birds, full of exclusive features and rare features that make them even more strange, more unique.
Terror birds flew onto the scene around 45 million years ago. There were 17 or 18 species in the group. It's up in the air.
They are almost all from Argentina, but there are some localities in Uruguay and Brazil and Texas and Florida in the States.
And they got their name, terror birds, because they are, once again, fucking terrifying. They are the grizzly bears of birds, the great white sharks of the land, Jack the Ripper, but with feathers.
The largest one were the top predators in South America, together with marsupials and terrestrial crocodiles.
And the largest ones were real large, like 10 feet tall and 400 pounds. The biggest species lived in Argentine Patagonia 15 million years ago, and the story of its discovery could easily be dramatized into a limited-run podcast.
It was found by a high school student, Guillermo Aguirre Zavala.
This is paleontologist Sara Bertelli. She works in Argentina as well and was one of the researchers to scientifically describe the skeleton that Guillermo found in 2004. He was playing with a friend near the railroad tracks of his village in Patagonia when he saw something sticking out of the ground. It looked like a beak with a curved hook at the end.
And they started to excavate it, and that's how this important specimen was found.
Guillermo then enlisted some help. He found a geologist working in a nearby city, and that geologist contacted Sara to see if she'd be interested in studying the fossil. Sara had studied big birds in the past, but when she went to see this fossil, she realized it was something different.
I mean, it was amazing. And actually being there with the fossil, it's a big rock. I remember I have to sit in order to hold the skull because it's quite heavy.
Here's Dino again.
The skull of that animal corresponds to the largest bird skull known, 71 centimeters long.
That's 2 feet. And this old bird's beak was sharp, too.
Like a knife.
And don't forget the nightmarish hook at the end.
This hook is large, curved, pointy. It's really good to stab and pierce meat.
But how exactly did they use that face weapon? That's what Dino wanted to know. So he and some colleagues studied the skulls of giant terror birds, and they found something strange. And this gets detailed fast, but here's the bird's eye view. For most living birds, there's some flexibility in the skull, including at the hinge where the beak attaches to the skull, so the beak can move a bit. But Dino's research shows that it's different for big terror birds. Their beak is fused to the skull, like, say, an axe blade is fused to a wooden handle. So you guessed it.
They use the beak as an axe to kill prey. They basically kill the prey using hatchet-like movements and strike them down with the beak.
This is how they really earn their name.
That's why they are terror birds.
So picture a 400-pound bird running at you at 25 miles per hour, because, by the way, they were fast too.
And imagine that during your running, that animal will be next to you and will start hitting you with its beak like an axe. After the first strike, probably you will start feeling nothing and you will be down with that large bird stepping on you and tearing you apart and eat you. That is a terror bird.
Fortunately, people never had to flee giant terror birds in real life. These birds didn't overlap with people. Other mammals weren't so lucky.
There were other ungulates that were around, like small horses that perfectly fit in the prey for a large terror bird.
These murder birds were one of a kind in avian history.
No other birds, extant or fossil, in the whole history of birds, occupy the niche of this hyper predator. Only the terror birds.
They're a reminder that what we see flapping around us today is just a bird dropping in the bucket of what came before.
Fossil animals are most intriguing. You cannot see them, cannot see how they behave. Personally, I think that's what is the most amazing part of being a paleontologist, because you have to imagine and hypothesize based on research. It's like, so this animal actually existed? Yes, it existed.
That goes for all the extinct bizarro birds we talked about over the past few episodes. They defy our notion of what it means to be a bird. Whether it was their size or stabbiness, their intercontinental gliding, or their girth, they represent the marvelous evolutionary wingtip of the avian world. You've just listened to the final episode in a 4-part Science Quickly fascination on really big birds. Before I fly the coop, I just want to say I've been proud as a peacock to be your host. Science Quickly is produced by Jeff Del Vicio, Talika Bose, and Kelso Harper. Theme music was composed by Dominic Smith. Don't forget to subscribe to Science Quickly wherever you get your podcasts. Head over to scientificamerican.com for in-depth science news. For Science Quickly, I'm Flora Lichtman.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1894. That was the day that the Colorado State Militia troops came to Cripple Creek to intervene in a mining strike. But unlike every other time in U.S. mining history that a state militia was called out, the Colorado State troops did not have their guns pointed at the miners. Instead, Colorado's populist governor David Waite had ordered the troops to the area because he was concerned by the large private army of gun thugs the mining company was amassing. Cripple Creek was in gold mining country, at the base of Pikes Peak. In February, the mine operators had declared that the miners would have to work a 10-hour workday for 8 hours of wages. The miners could stay on the 8-hour schedule, but they would have to take a 17% pay cut. Outraged, the miners walked out of the mines. The Western Federation of Miners led the strike, which wore on for 5 long months, with violence on both sides. The mine owners were determined to end the walkout and gathered a private gun force of more than 1,200 hired thugs. On June 5th, there was a standoff between the miners and the company hired guns at the Bull Hill mine. Unable to take the mine, the company guns instead unleashed their anger and fury on the townspeople of Cripple Creek. They raided homes, arrested people, and beat them in the streets. In response, the governor threatened to keep the state militia in the area until the strike was settled. The mine owners knew that they were beat, opting to settle the strike, marking a major victory for the Western Federation of Miners and their members.
It is for our little children that seem to us so dear, but for us nor them dear workers, the bosses do not care.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world or along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 61 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the mid-80s, mostly cloudy with scattered thunderstorms developing throughout the day, and looks like the winds will be out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then scattered thunderstorms this evening with mostly cloudy skies after midnight, lows in the upper 50s, winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then partly cloudy early tomorrow with scattered thunderstorms developing again throughout the day, highs in the mid-80s, winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And we can only hope that we get enough rain to maybe put out any of the forest fires that might be started by the lightning. And then the low rumble of thunder rumbling across the countryside. That's not what starts the fires, but it does have a rumble. Okay, grass pollen is rated very high here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 22 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is very high at level 9, so take care. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.88 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 80%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that's why it's known and is the Weather Underground. London is 70 degrees and sunny. Paris is 81 and sunny. Rome is 80 degrees and fair. Kiev is 75 degrees and cloudy. Kabul is 73 and clear. Hong Kong is 85 and fair. Tokyo is 72 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 58 degrees and fair. San Francisco, California is 60 degrees and cloudy with a small craft advisory on the bay. And New York, New York is 68 degrees Fahrenheit, partly cloudy, and you have a hazardous air advisory because of the choking smoke. So do take care as well. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Ashok Sharma of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. An Air India plane flying from New Delhi to San Francisco was diverted to Russia after it developed an engine problem, the airline said today, Wednesday. The plane, a Boeing 777 carrying 216 passengers and 16 crew members, landed safely at Russia's Magadan airport in Siberia in the country's far east yesterday, Tuesday, Air India said in a statement. The flight developed a technical issue with one of its engines, it said, adding that the aircraft was undergoing safety checks and the passengers were being provided support on the ground. The airline said later that a replacement aircraft had taken off from Mumbai and was flying to Magadan so the stranded passengers could continue their travel to the United States. The aircraft will take the passengers to San Francisco tomorrow, Thursday, it said. You hope. Vendant Patel, a U.S. State Department spokesperson, said American citizens were likely on the flight but could not immediately confirm how many. We are continuing to monitor the situation, Patel said. Gurvan Singh Kama, age 16, was traveling on the flight with his uncle and brother. He said they were barred from leaving the hostel where they are staying in Magadan and cannot use their credit cards to buy things because of sanctions over Russia's war in Ukraine. The first day and a half was really hard for all of us, he said. The weather went from about 36 degrees Fahrenheit in the morning, and in the night it was bitter cold, he said, adding that it was getting better with food and a place to sleep.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Jocelyn Novak of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Françoise Guillot, a prolific and acclaimed painter who produced art for well more than a half-century but was nonetheless more famous for her turbulent relationship with Pablo Picasso and for leaving him, died yesterday in New York City, where she had lived for decades. She was 101. Guillot's daughter, Aurelia Engel, told the AP her mother had died at Mount Sinai West Hospital after suffering both lung and heart problems. She was an extremely talented artist, and we will be working on her legacy and the incredible paintings and work she is leaving with us, Engel said. The French-born Guillot had long made her frustration clear that, despite acclaim for her art, which she produced from her teenage years until 5 years ago, she would still be best known for her relationship with the older Picasso, whom she met in 1943 at age 21, his junior by 4 decades. The union produced 2 children, Claude and Paloma Picasso, but unlike the other key women in Picasso's life, wives or paramours, Guillot eventually walked out. He never saw it coming, Engels said of her mother's departure. She was there because she loved him and because she really believed in that incredible passion of art which they both shared. But she came as a free, though very, very young, but very independent person. Guillot herself told the Guardian newspaper in 2016 that I was not a prisoner of the relationship. I'd been there of my own will, and I left of my own will, she said, then aged 94. That's what I told him once before I left. I said, watch out, because I came when I wanted to, but I will leave when I want. He said, nobody leaves a man like me. I said, we'll see. And he found out, didn't he? All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver.